Guten Tag, meine Damen und Herren, und willkommen zurück. Today, we're going to start out with something a little different. We are going to break our tongues. Naja, not literally. You see, the German word for tongue twister is der Zungenbrecher, which literally means tongue breaker. But really, it's not as bad as it sounds. In fact, Zungenbrecher can be really helpful for first-time learners of German. And so I thought it would be fun to warm up our mouths today and to practice our Aussprache by working our way through 2 Zungenbrecher. Alles klar? Gut. Also dann, meine Damen und Herren, our first Zungenbrecher is this. 8 alte Drachen riechen nichts. Remember that a CH in German is pronounced as ch or ch, depending on the vowel that it comes after. Listen carefully. 8 alte Drachen riechen nichts. By the way, this Zungenbrecher translates to 8 old dragons smell nothing. Yeah, it's a little odd, I know, but hey, it helps us practice our ch's and our ch's. Now here's our second Zungenbrecher. Sieben Bienen weinen leise über die Liebe. Note in particular the IE and the EI spellings. Now, IE is pronounced as I, Sieben Bienen. The EI is pronounced as I, weinen leise. Also dann, one more time. Sieben Bienen weinen leise über die Liebe. What we just said was 7 bees cry quietly over love. It's almost poetic, right? And it's definitely cute. Sehen Sie? Deutsche Zungenbrecher don't hurt that much at all. Gut. Und jetzt, meine Damen und Herren, let's continue with our Reise durch die deutsche Sprache, our journey through the German language. We're going to begin today with the verb sein. It means to be, and it's arguably the most important verb in the language. And in fact, here to give us a preview of just how we conjugate sein with German's personal pronouns is someone that we've already met before on our journey. Her name is Mia Gruber. Remember that we met Mia and her husband Ralf in Die Schweiz, on the mountain peak Kulm. And for this lesson, I've asked Mia to tell us a little bit about her family, die Familie Gruber. Alles klar? Also dann, hören wir zu.
Das ist meine Familie. Ich bin Mia. Ich bin die Mutter. Das ist mein Mann Ralf Gruber. Er ist der Vater. Wir sind die Eltern von Rahel und Hans. Sie sind die Kinder. Rahel ist die Tochter und Hans ist der Sohn. Die Personen hier sind Paul und Sabina. Sie sind die Eltern von Ralf und die Großeltern von Rahel und Hans. Sabina ist die Oma und Paul ist der Opa. Die Familie Gruber ist klein, aber wir sind glücklich.
Dankeschön, Frau Gruber. By the way, did you notice all the cognates in Mia's monologue? Mia talked about a brother, der Bruder, a sister, die Schwester, 2 children, 2 Kinder, a Sohn, a Tochter, and so on. These family name cognates are not just coincidence. They're more evidence that English and German are closely related languages. Listen one more time as I describe die Familie Gruber. Some words, like der Junge and die Enkelin, will be unfamiliar, but many words, like der Vater and die Mutter, will be fairly clear. Der Junge ist Hans. Hans ist der Bruder von Rahel und der Sohn von Mia und Ralf. Er ist auch der Enkel von Sabine und Paul. Das Mädchen ist Rahel. Sie ist die Schwester von Hans und die Tochter von Mia und Ralf. Sie ist auch die Enkelin von Sabine und Paul. Die Frau ist Mia. Sie ist die Frau von Ralf und die Mutter von Hans und Rahel. Sie ist auch die Schwiegertochter von Sabine und Paul. Der Mann ist Ralf. Er ist der Mann von mir und der Vater von Hans und Rahel. Er ist auch der Sohn von Sabine und Paul. And let's not forget about Sabine und Paul. Der Mann und die Frau sind Sabine und Paul. Sie sind die Eltern von Ralf und die Großeltern von Hans und Rahel. Sabine ist die Oma und Paul ist der Opa. It's not too hard to follow, right? As speakers of English, we only need 10 or 15 minutes to learn the basic vocabulary for talking about our Familie. Gut. Let's move on to our first grammar topic, shall we? We're going to start with personal pronouns. A pronoun, by the way, is exactly what it says it is. It's a word that stands in for a noun, a pronoun. So instead of saying the girl, the hammer, or the people, we can replace these nouns with a word that refers to them or stands in for them. We use she instead of the girl, it for the hammer, and they for the people. So think of it this way. When we say words like I or you, what we're basically doing is using those words, both of them pronouns, in lieu of our own name or the name of the person we're addressing. So instead of speaking in the third person all the time, James is happy, does James like German? We say, I am happy, or do you like German? The same goes for objects. Instead of saying an object's name over and over, we can refer to it as it. I like that clock. It is fancy. And if we're talking about several clocks, we usually wouldn't say something like, I like those clocks are fancy. We'd say, I like those clocks. They are fancy. Speakers of German use pronouns in similar ways. In place of a noun, they put in one of the following pronouns. As we can see, German pronouns express three perspectives: first person, second person, and third person. Two numbers, singular and plural. Three genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter. And two social modes of address, formal and informal. Let's start with the singular pronouns. First, we have ich for the first person, du for the second person, informal, and sie for the second person, formal. Note that the formal pronoun sie is capitalized. Next, we have the third person pronouns, which express three genders. The pronoun er is masculine, sie is feminine, and es is neuter. Moving on to the plural pronouns, for the first person we have wir, for the second person informal, there's ihr, and for the second person formal, we have sie. Note again that sie is written with a capital S. And finally, for the third person plural, there's only one gender, sie. And that's it, meine Damen und Herren. Ich, du, sie, er, sie, es, wir, ihr, sie, and sie. Now, perhaps you're wondering, when do I use the informal pronouns du and ihr as opposed to the formal pronouns sie and sie when I'm addressing another speaker or speakers? Well, here's a rule of thumb that I teach my students and which I use myself. When in doubt, and if the person or persons you're addressing look the same age or older as you, use sie. Anytime you address someone you're not on familiar terms with, for instance, a food vendor, a bank teller, or a pedestrian, address them with sie. The formal pronoun sie is also commonplace among employees in the German-speaking workplace. With their families and friends, though, German speakers readily use du and ihr. For example, they might text a friend to ask where they are. Hey, wo bist du? But when they meet a new colleague at work, and they're interested in where that new colleague is from, they would ask, woher sind Sie? Now, there's one more thing I need to tell you about personal pronouns in German. We've seen these pronouns often refer to people. That is, er stands for der Vater, the singular sie for die Mutter, and the plural pronoun sie can stand for die Eltern, and so on. But remember that all nouns in German, even objects, have a gender. So even if we're referring to a thing and not a person, the pronoun we use must reflect the gender of the noun it's replacing. Here's what I mean. Take the word for tree. It's der Baum. It's masculine. Now, if we use a pronoun to refer to der Baum, we have to use er, the masculine pronoun. So imagine that we're walking in a forest and we come across this really old and beautiful tree. Well, we might say, ach, der Baum ist sehr alt, aber ist schön. What we're literally saying is, the tree is very old, but he is beautiful. Feminine objects like die Universität, the university, take the pronoun sie. As in the sentence, die Universität ist klein, aber sie ist renommiert. Again, what we're literally saying is that the university is small, but she is renowned. For neuter objects like das Museum, the pronoun is es. So we might say, das Museum ist klein, aber es ist renommiert. And finally, for plural objects, we use the pronoun sie. So if we go into a forest and see many beautiful old trees, we would say, die Bäume sind sehr alt, aber sie sind schön. They are beautiful. Now, I realize that to speakers of English, it might sound peculiar to call a university she or to refer to a tree as he, but this is how German works. People and things have a grammatically assigned gender. Also dann, meine Damen und Herren, let's take our new knowledge of pronouns a step further. Let's put them to use with our new verb sein. By the way, sein is what linguists call an infinitive form of the verb. Basically, this means that the verb is not conjugated with the subject, such as a noun or a pronoun. Like many languages, German verbs take endings and even change their base form when you use them with a subject. In fact, changing a verb's infinitive form to express or agree with a noun or pronoun is called subject-verb agreement. You might have heard that. And so when we agree a verb with our subject, we say that the verb gets conjugated according to person, first, second, or third person, and number, singular or plural. We can see how this works in Mia's monologue about her Familie. Mia, for instance, conjugates the verb sein with several subject pronouns.
Wir sind die Familie Gruber. Ich bin Mia und ich bin die Mutter. Das ist Ralf. Er ist der Vater. Das sind Hans und Rahel. Sie sind die Kinder.
Listen closely to the conjugations we just heard. Ich bin, wir sind, ist, sie sind. Two of them actually sound a little like English. Ich bin, I am, and of course, ist, he is. The rest of the conjugations are more foreign to our English speaker ears. Let's go through the conjugations now. We'll start with the singular pronouns. For the first person, it's ich bin. For the second person, informal, we have du bist. And for the second person formal, it's sie sind. As for the third person pronouns, sie, es, they all take the same conjugation. Ist, sie ist, and es ist. For the plural pronouns, the first person conjugation of sein is wir sind. For the second person informal, we have ihr seid. And for the formal, we have sie sind. Finally, for the third person plural, we have sie sind. Wunderbar! How about an exercise to practice these conjugations? We're going to see a sentence with a few possible conjugations of sein in parentheses. Our job will be to choose the correct conjugation. Alles klar? Also dann, los geht's. Our first sentence is mir ist, mir bist, or mir sind die Frau von Ralf. Gut. The correct conjugation would be mir ist die Frau von Ralf. Okay, here's our next sentence. Wir seid, wir bin, or wir sind aktiv und gesund. Genau. The sentence should go, wir sind gesund und aktiv. All right, let's do two more. Our next sentence, Ralf, du seid, du bist, or du bin ein netter Mann. Sehr gut. The correct conjugation is du bist ein netter Mann. Okay, last one, I promise. Kinder, ihr sind, ihr seid, or ihr ist brav. Richtig. If we were to say to the kids, kids, you guys are being good, we would say, Kinder, ihr seid brav. You see, sein isn't that difficult at all, right? Still, be sure to follow up with the exercises in our course workbook, and there you can find more chances to practice conjugating sein. Also dann, meine Damen und Herren, the time has now come to bring up another important, albeit challenging, aspect about German nouns, namely their plural forms. And I won't mince words about it. Meine Damen und Herren, for most people, the German system for making nouns plural appears complicated and random. And to some extent, it is. Nevertheless, we'll see that there are some rules that we can apply. But first, let's address the randomness of the German plural system. And to that end, let's bring back some of the family-related vocab we've already learned in this lesson. We saw that die Familie Gruber has two children, Rahel und Hans. And so we would say, Rahel und Hans sind die Kinder. Note that the singular noun, das Kind, becomes die Kinder when you make it plural. The definite article changes to die, and in fact, all plural forms of nouns in German take the definite article die, regardless of gender. So this, in fact, is a hard and fast rule for making things plural. All German nouns have the same definite article in the plural, and that article is die. As for the noun itself, though, well, you don't just stick on an er suffix onto all nouns to make them plural. This is where the so-called randomness comes into play. For instance, we know that Rahel is Ralf und Mia's Tochter. And if they had two daughters, well, we would say, das sind die Töchter. No er suffix. All we do is umlaut the vowel. Tochter, singular. Töchter, plural. Taking this example further, we could also describe the two Töchter as sisters. That is, die Schwestern. Here, we add an N to get the plural. Die Schwester goes to die Schwestern. Now, as for Hans, remember he's der Sohn. Let's say, though, we had a brother. Well, then we would say that Hans and this other Jung, we'd say, das sind die Söhne. Here, we add an E suffix to Sohn and we umlaut the vowel. Der Sohn, singular, die Söhne, plural. Pretty fun, right? So far, then, we've seen four ways of making German nouns plural. We have das Kind, die Kinder, die Tochter, die Töchter, die Schwester, die Schwestern, and der Sohn, die Söhne. Now, I wish it stopped here, but the truth is there are several more forms that a German plural noun can take. For instance, we have das Messer, singular, die Messer, plural, der Pilot, singular, die Piloten, die Pilotin, die Pilotinnen, der Freund, die Freunde, das Baby, die Babys, der Wald, die Wälder, and finally, there are nouns like das Material, which go to die Materialien in the plural. Now, I realize this looks complicated, maybe even scary, aber keine Panik. I'm here to help. On the one hand, it is true that, like gender, we often just have to memorize the plural form of each German noun. On the other hand, just like I showed you for gender, there are some patterns we can apply for making a noun plural. For instance, nouns that end in an E always take an N in their plural form. Zum Beispiel, der Neffe, die Neffen, die Tante, die Tanten, die Nichte, die Nichten. Here's another tip. Remember all the suffixes that make a noun feminine? These were heit, kite, schafft, and ung. Well, any noun that ends with one of these suffixes will also always take an en suffix in their plural form. Die Freiheit, die Freiheiten, die Möglichkeit, die Möglichkeiten, die Freundschaft, die Freundschaften, and die Endung, die Endungen. Here is one more reliable pattern that we can apply to make a noun plural in German. All neuter nouns that end in chen remain in the same form in their plural. For example, das Brötchen, singular, die Brötchen, plural. Das Mädchen, the girl, die Mädchen, plural, girls. So there you have it. These are 3 fail-safe tricks for learning the plural forms of many German nouns. As for the countless other nouns for which these tricks don't work, well, for those nouns, I would give you the same advice that I did for grammatical gender. Learn a noun's plural form at the same time as you learn the word itself. For instance, don't just learn that Tisch is table, Fenster is window, and Wand is wall, and then just leave it at that. No. Learn that it's der Tisch, singular, die Tische, plural, das Fenster, die Fenster, die Wand, die Wände, and so on and so on. Also, don't forget our handy course workbook. There you'll find exercises to get you started down the long but rewarding path of learning German plural forms. And at the start of every chapter in the workbook, you'll find a vocabulary box that lists nouns together with their gender and their plural form. Also dann, meine Damen und Herren, with that, sadly, we shall bring this lesson to a close. We've covered a lot of ground, including how to use pronouns to refer to people and objects, how to conjugate the verb sein with these pronouns, and we've learned essential vocabulary for talking about our family. Be sure to tune in for Lesson 4, where our Reise durch die deutsche Sprache will continue with a primer on how to conjugate all verbs in German. Also dann, auf Wiedersehen und bis gleich.